Hi, I'm Dr. Kelly Fitzsimmons Burton, and today I'm preparing for a live podcast that's happening tonight with some of my friends, Brandon and AJ with InkleDeux. And the topic of the podcast tonight is secularism versus pluralism. And so I was out here in my office preparing for that discussion, and I thought this would make a really good video topic. Secularism versus pluralism. So I thought I would just put down my ideas and see what happens. So we should probably set up some frameworks for discussing this topic. And the framework that I'm going to start with is the United States of America. And the relationship between the institutions of religion and politics. So institutions are those societal organizations that provide some structures, some rules and guidelines for how to live in society. And we have lots of institutions, and we have to know what the goal of that institution is in order to live a meaningful life within institutions. So some of the institutions of our society are family, religion, the state, the economic system, the education system. So I'll be talking about some of those today. Another framework we have to think about in terms of this discussion between secularism and pluralism is the First Amendment. So I'm just going to read that to refresh your memory. The First Amendment says, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. There's more to it, but that's the part I want to focus on. All right, so there's two parts to this. Congress shall make no law establishing a religion, so we'll call that the No Establishment Clause, and Congress shall make no law prohibiting the free exercise of religion. All right, so the Free Exercise Clause. So don't establish a religion and don't prohibit the exercise of religion. Okay, so we can see that this is the two institutions of politics and religion and how they will be related in American society. So here's the history of this problem. If you notice, secularism versus pluralism is kind of dichotomy, right? It looks like they're in opposition to each other, and they are, probably. But how did it get to be that way? Well, let's talk about history a little bit. So the history in America, briefly. Building a nation requires unity of some sort, right? So if we're going to have a United States of America, we need some basis of unity. And originally the nation was roughly a division of Protestant denominations. So the unity was that they were roughly Protestant, roughly agreeing that there's a God and how God rules. And the other aspect, though, is there's a division between Protestant denominations, so they don't agree with one another. It's like not like there's one Protestantism, there's different ones, like the Reformed people and the Lutherans and the Baptists and the Methodists. So a division among Protestants. So the concern was that Congress not favor one denomination of Protestants over another originally. But there's a unity of values. If they're not united in say, religion specifically, like one denomination, there's a unity of values we can identify, and we can identify it from the founding documents. So there's a desire for the protection of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. There's a value of equality of human beings, before God and under the law. At least they say it in principle, and it's written down. So we have this source of unity, equality, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, okay, roughly. Now, as the United States continues to grow, time goes on, there's a growth of religious diversity in America. There's the immigration of Catholics and Jews at first, bringing their religions. Then Eastern peoples, peoples from India, Muslims, etc., then everybody's coming. And America is not a melting pot. It's a salad bowl. So everyone's got their diverse identities. So we could talk about diversity as an aspect of American society that gives rise to pluralism. Okay, so pluralism is the thing I want to talk about next. So we can talk about plurality of different viewpoints. And plurality happens when we are Americans in a political sense, and we have our religious or our non-religious identity as well. So we have a political identity of I'm an American, but we have our religious identity as well. And how do we navigate those different identities, particularly in the public sphere? Pluralism is a value of some people in the American political system. It goes something like this. We should respect and protect the plurality of the ways in which Americans and groups in America pursue happiness. That sounds like a good value, right? Protect and respect the plurality of ways in which Americans and groups in America pursue happiness. I think of it as like a live and let live attitudes towards the different approaches to religious life that individuals and groups have within the institution of religion. So we have this broad institution, religion, and we have a diversity of ways of being religious in America. Okay, that doesn't sound very harmful right now, right? And it does seem like it's a value of a lot of people. It's a good thing. Now, what happens when we have plurality of religions, plus we have public education? So now we have another institution, public education. Now, how did we get public education? Historically, in the United States, the educational system was started by the Protestants, who came first, and later Catholic immigrants didn't want to be educated in the Protestant way, understandably so, and so they wanted Catholic schools, but they wanted Catholic schools to be funded by tax dollars. So now we have a problem. If education is public, it's being supported by public monies, then should it be religious, like Catholic education? And so instead of granting the Catholics their wishes, the Protestants, the dominant people in the educational system and in the governmental system, pulled the no establishment of religion card. And this set the course for, I'm going to claim, the secularization of public education. So here's how it goes. If Protestants and Catholics can't agree on the content of religious education, because of their religious differences, then religion will be totally excluded from public education. So get rid of religion. Just educate without it. Over time, we see that the Bible is removed from education, prayer is removed, religious holidays, and the trend continues. Whatever is religious and it's in education, someone will find a way to say that's not neutral, that's not shared by everyone, we should get rid of that. Okay. All right, when we get to the modern period, which is roughly 1650 to 1950s, there's this gradual, what some people call the collapse of the sacred canopy, and the emphasis becomes on this world. That's what the word secular means. Secular refers to the world, to the mundane, to what is profane, and this is often contrasted with the sacred. Okay, so we're getting less and less sacred in the world, and more the emphasis is on this world only, merely. Charles Taylor, in his gigantic book, which I have right here, A Secular Age, this book, calls this the immanent frame. And the immanent frame is where we no longer have recourse as a society to transcendent reality. So immanence is presence, this world, versus transcendence, otherworldly. And he thinks that in this view, religion is to be kept private. It's for the individual. And what happens is, because the public sphere is a shared space and we don't share religion, we don't talk about religion in the public. Religion can't be something that's a basis for common ground. When in the past, maybe it was. People took that for granted. So what are some of the assumptions going on with the collapse of the sacred canopy and the immanent frame? Here's some assumptions. Just want to point it out because I like pointing out assumptions. First one is that religion is not common ground. Now, we could raise a question here and say, what is religion? Who's religious? Aren't all people religious in some sense? The second assumption is that there's no transcendent reality, only this world. That sounds a little suspicious, doesn't it? Do we have an argument for this? Who's given us an argument that this is the only world that exists? Or is this an assumption, an unspoken assumption that needs critical analysis? I want an argument that this is the only world. The third assumption is that, I'm going to put this in here, the pursuit of happiness is a purely individual pursuit. Whatever you think will make you happy, go ahead and pursue that, as long as it doesn't harm somebody else. And what about the common good? Do we ever think about the common good or the need for unity? Don't we need that? So it seems like pursuit of happiness as an individual, this is a big assumption. And is that going to work over the long haul? And I want to suggest that we're heading towards a new religion with this collapse of the sacred canopy and the immanent frame, and that's where I want to talk about secularism. Okay, this is a different reality now in the history of America and the world now. And secularism is different than the secular. Secularism is the view that religion ought not to have any part of the public life of American society. Religion shouldn't be a part of American society, and American society is political society, right? Is it though? Is that it? Secularism is often antagonistic to religion or is explicitly anti-religion. And if you wonder about that assumption or that claim, just look up Freedom from Religion Foundation and see what they're all about. So secularism, I'm going to say, is a position that's bordering on religion, and I'll give you an example of that very soon. Okay, there's one more category we should talk about in the history of America and in the world now, and that's secularization. So scholars, and I'm going to show you one that I appreciate, Jeffrey Stout, who talks about democracy and tradition in this book. He talks about the different processes of secularization. So there's the world, secularism, which is bordering on a worldview or a religion, and secularization, which is the process of the world becoming more and more worldly, less and less sacred, religious. All right, so secularization is the sociological process by which public life in America and the world, I'm going to claim, has become less religious and more focused upon life in this world, merely this world. Now, the question that comes up in the study of religion is this: is secularization a natural process born out of pluralism? So is secularization what happens when pluralism goes on through time in a political sphere of America? Or is secularization driven by philosophical assumptions and power interests? Okay, so there's another book. I didn't bring it with me to my other library, but it's called The Secular Revolution, and it's by Christian Smith. It's a really good book, but he shows in this book that there are people in different fields, academic fields, things like psychology, journalism, history, religious studies, theology, who are pushing a narrative, basically. And because they're in positions of power, they're pushing their position into prominence in those positions of power. So he thinks that secularization is not neutral, it's not something that's inevitable, but it's something that was pushed, is being pushed by the secularists. So I'll let you think about that. I think there's something to it. If you want to read Christian Smith's argument, I recommend it. The Secular Revolution. I'll put it in the notes below. All right, so now we have to come a little bit to close a little bit here. Close the gaps. So we had these different frameworks. Now we see that there's a clash of frameworks. We have religious plurality, which has to do with the institution of religion. And we have America, a political identity, the institution of politics, and now we have public education. I think this is where we really feel this problem, the institution of education. Public education seems to be where a lot of the question of the establishment of religion comes up. So here's a little argument about the impossibility of public education. The impossibility of public education. So if something is public, then it is necessarily neutral, shared by all. But if something is education, then it is necessarily interpretive. There's an interpretation going on, and interpretations are in light of philosophical assumptions, and so they're not possibly neutral. Interpretations are never neutral. So public education is necessarily neutral because it's public, and it's not possibly neutral because it's education. And so public education is an impossibility. So this is where we feel the non-neutrality of secularism. So if secularism becomes the dominant teaching position, let's say in the academy, actually the whole K through graduate school system in America, then public education, in the name of neutrality, has become the instrument of the establishment of state religion. Ooh, so secularism becomes the religion of the state. It's sneaked in. It comes in through the back door. So it's not like a legal code, but if you come up against it, see what happens. All right, so I want to make the claim, and this is my claim, and I could be wrong, so you can correct me if I am, that secularism has all the marks of a religion. And what is a religion? I'm going to say it's a belief or set of beliefs by which we give meaning to our experiences. And so there are categories for comparing religions. So let's look at the categories and fill in the answers with secularism. All right, so the first category is authority. What's your authority? What's the authority of this religion? Secularism, I'm going to say it's the senses or science, empiricism. Ultimate reality is the second category. What's ultimate reality in secularism? The material world, the physical world, matter is all that exists, the immanent frame. Human nature. Humans are evolved animals, progressing but evolved. What's the human problem? I don't know. There's probably a lot of human problems, but it does seem to be suffering due to a lack of financial means. Like if I just had more money, I'd be more happy or comfortable. So what's the solution? I think we've tried capitalism and communism, but it does seem like we're headed towards more socialism/communism as a means of alleviating human suffering. So we need an equal distribution of the means for happiness and comfort, and, you know, money is the means. What is the concept of time in secularism? Time is linear but progressive. So we always have this idea of progress. And maybe we'll progress beyond religion. I think that's probably an assumption too. What about practices? Are there any sort of ritual religious practices in secularism? I think so. Whatever makes you feel good. And do what feels good, don't harm others. I think that's the practice. Are there any things that people are devoted to in secularism? I'm going to say, yeah, the self and the state. The state becomes the dominant institution because the state is the one who can ensure happiness. We're not going to find it in the family. We're not going to find it in religion, for sure. The economic system needs to be helped by the state. And what else? Education. The state is pretty much in control of education right now. So, devotion to the state. All right, so is there a conflict between secularism and pluralism? I'm going to say probably yes. Secularism becomes an alternative religion, a dominant religion, even if we don't call it that. It's acting that way to the exclusion of others. So pluralism is almost like the celebration of the diversity of different religions that there are out there, and allowing people to live and let live. But when we live together, and particularly when we get educated together, someone has to rise to the top to provide a source of unity. And I'm going to say, in the state, without religion in the traditional sense, secularism takes that place of acting as a unifying belief system. But I could be wrong, and you can show me that I'm wrong. All right, thanks for hanging out with me and letting me work these ideas out. I hope you will like, subscribe, and share.